Hello and welcome to an aviation podcast hosted by 270 Aviation. With offices across the globe, our team of consultants discuss the latest developments across the aviation industry and share the insights they've gained working alongside some of the world's major airports and airlines over the past 20 years. So whether you're a seasoned professional or a budding aviation enthusiast, take a moment to sit back, plug your earphones in and join us over a warm cup of coffee. On this episode, the 270 team is joined by Anthony Ciccottini of Redwater Consulting to discuss the role that regional aviation and domestic tourism play in Australian aviation recovery. In part 1, they explore the challenges of restarting the aviation industry and the longevity of the regional markets developed during COVID. Over to your hosts.
Yeah, thank you. So my name's Matt Shepherd. I'm a senior consultant with 270 Aviation. I have a background in air traffic control. I've worked not only as an air traffic controller through most of Australia, I've introduced a lot of projects and technology, systems, procedures into the air traffic control, air traffic management environment. I was involved in bringing in the air traffic flow management system into Australia, which manages ground delay to minimise airborne delay for aircraft operating, particularly in the busy J-curve around Australia. And in the last 5 years, I've been involved in a number of other projects looking at airport collaborative decision making and other ways to improve the flow of traffic through our network.
So my name is Anthony Ciccottini. I'm the Managing Director for Redwater Consulting Group. We're a specialist aviation strategy firm, and we tend to focus on traffic forecasting and market analysis and data analytics. A bit about my background. Been in the industry for about 15 years. Kind of worked all over the place. Started out in Canada. Actually, my first job in aviation was I was a baggage attendant in the ramp in Toronto, and then moved into operations and planning, based in Dubai and Malaysia. And for about the past 10 years of my career, I've been focused on the economic side, air service development, and market analysis. Completed work, I think last check was 17 different countries, so kind of a badge of honor. And currently engaged in a few forecasting projects and strategy projects in Southeast Asia, the South Pacific.
Well, it must be very difficult, I guess, scheduling and bringing an aircraft back to life after it's been sleeping for 6 to 8 months. And the planning and the logistics around bringing the staff back, the equipment back online, making sure everything is ready. So when the customers come barreling through the door, keen to board their flight and head off to see their family for the first time in 8 months or so, you need to have everything absolutely ready to operate. I know the airports have been working with a limited delivery for a period of time, but to bring everything back with enough capacity to start to take on full loads and process people through, there's would be an awakening experience, I guess, and something that requires a lot of logistics and planning. Quite interested to see how that's rolling out, not only through the airline system, but also through the airports too. They're having to bring back on their systems and start to have people trickling through doors where in the past they haven't been coming. So a lot of things have to come back on time, and I can understand why some airlines would be slow and easing back into it, and also making sure that the markets are ready to receive them.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. It shows you that the absolute dynamics of the situation that we've been kind of faced in really is a result of kind of the unpredictability of what's happening. Suddenly the state borders open up and it's just a mad rush to kind of get capacity back into the air. And Qantas, I think, announced that they were looking to be at 80% of domestic capacity by Christmas, or at least the new year. Virgin as well, they're coming back up. So yeah, there's this pent up demand, of course. So you've seen the airlines kind of react to that. Also, a little bit farther out is the Rex announcement, of course, with 737s entering into the Golden Triangle routes, and their first flight's looking at 1st of March. So there's that to ramp up as well. So it's all a bit kind of happening on the airline front, really.
Yeah, I see that Rex have released images of their new aircraft livery. It's quite a jazzy look to it. It's an interesting approach. It's going to be fantastic to see them come rolling out. And it's an entirely new market for them, really, isn't it? I mean, they've flown into those airports, but not with those aircraft before. So, locating the pilots to come on board, locating the ground crew to be able to configure those aircraft up and run it. And they're flying on different routes. They're not just doing the J-curve. These aircraft are opening up. As Australia comes back online, we've been looking at unusual routes in the environment, and things like Dubbo to Ballina. Yeah, and it's fantastic. Do you think that's going to be something that continues on those offbeat routes?
You know, the thought that goes through my head whenever I see these kind of offbeat routes is the old saying that markets regress to the mean, and they weren't doing it before. So what's going to kind of support them afterwards? What new markets have been uncovered to some degree? And look, I'm not saying that they haven't uncovered anything or haven't uncovered something that is sustainable from an operational financial point of view. But yeah, it makes you wonder if it was just an opportunistic move given the state of the industry. So that one kind of, I look with Ernst to kind of see how that actually unveils and unravels, because I don't know if a lot of them will stick around, quite frankly. There's government support funding for some routes. When that tap gets turned off, is it going to make them unviable again? Because if they were so viable before, why weren't they doing them before? Kind of goes into like efficient market theory. If there's $100 bill on the ground, just keep on walking, because if it was really a $100 bill, somebody would have picked it up.
Do you know how many times I've picked up a glued on $100 bill on the ground, or a coin that's been glued to the ground to make me stop in front of that shop?
Exactly. So, if there's opportunities that are out there, you think they would have been acted on before. And I know it's a bit kind of an odd way to think about airline route networks, because then eventually nobody would do anything. It would just be what it was historically. And that's not the case. Yeah, if you see some of these markets that are coming out and you think, oh, that's great, but you go, why weren't, double Ballina, was it always there? Why, what's changed? Why is that suddenly not viable? What's going on? Is it a government subsidy scheme to keep, I know they had the domestic subsidy scheme rolled out, or was it just, there was a certain lack of direct demand? So, maybe the double Ballina traffic was always being routed via Sydney, for example, with Sydney shut down, potentially that was why that one worked out. So, maybe that was a good thing to come out of it. So, you see some weird kind of happenings, but I just got this regression to the mean sort of concept stuck in the back of my head. So we'll see how that develops.
So you're feeling that we're going to go back to the old paradigm. That was the center of, that was the bell curve. That was where things were drifting back to. And when the pandemic gets out of the way and we go back to reality, we end up back in the same boat of the same drivers will be there. People will still have family in the same locations. The population masses are in the same locations. People will fly around the J curve. So they'll be particularly in the Golden Triangle, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, that'll have the majority of traffic. And everything will sort of relocate back. I was wondering whether the regional market would would hold firmer for a little bit longer, because with Australians not being able to travel overseas for the foreseeable future, if that stays the case, Australians will want to travel, they'll want to get away. At the moment, and prior to aviation coming online, they were driving and trapped in their state. Now they can get out of their state, but they're still caught in Australia. It's a real drive for people to get out to the regions, and I think this is an opportunity for regional aviation to maybe grow and establish a market.
Yeah, it's an interesting time in the domestic market. We're seeing a lot of announcements coming up with the border restrictions kind of lifting and doing so very dynamically. Qantas has sort of pledged just recently, capacity by the end of the financial year. And they've been also active on the regional market as well. Even with the border restrictions sort of in place and working around that strategy. Some notable routes they added were Cairns to Canberra, Maroochydore, Canberra. So, they were active kind of in that route development space, kind of waiting for the border restrictions to lift, or at least trying to take advantage of the ones that were kind of in place and worked in their favor. But they also were doing things like Sydney Mildura they announced and just started operating recently. So, they've been quite active in that, and you'll see them kind of return to their traditional markets and bring capacity back up, which is pretty exciting as well. There's also a degree on the Qantas side, a bit of competitive responses as well. I mentioned Cairns Canberra and the Maroochydore Canberra route. And actually the Hobart Canberra route was another one that they announced recently. And funny enough, and take this potentially with a grain of salt, is Hobart Canberra and Sunshine Coast Canberra were routes that had been previously announced by another carrier. So you had Alliance Airlines starting the Sunshine Coast Canberra route, and then you had Link Airways, formerly Fly Corporate, announce the Hobart Canberra route, and then literally the month after, Qantas got on the route. Never had looked at it before potentially. So some people looking at the market now, looking at the competitive responses as well. So yeah, it's interesting sort of dynamic on the Qantas side, because they have the traditional markets, but also active in and kind of seeking out new opportunities as well. And we mentioned Rex and they're getting into the Golden Triangle and taking advantage of some really I would say cheap aircraft, but surplus aircraft where they can get a good lease rate. Golden Triangle's established market with VA, Virgin Australia, retiring a large portion of their fleet in the interim as they come out of administration. They're taking advantage of that power vacuum to kind of get a foothold in that market as well. So it's quite interesting to see how that's happening. So their first flight, I believe, is on the 1st of March next year. So it's still some time away from that, but you're starting to see airlines return capacity in that regards. Now, one thing as well, really interesting, is the alliance announcements, and it's been a bit old news now to some degree, maybe about a month or two old. Was the acquisition of Embraer 190 aircraft. And they've started to arrive in country as well. And there's 14 of these regional aircraft that are coming into market. So, and they're positioning themselves to be a much bigger airline, either take advantage of some commercial agreements with Virgin to fly on their behalf, potentially increase charter traffic, or themselves just operating new routes as well. So it's pretty intriguing to see how that's all unfolding.
It's interesting to see the Embraer come back. I mean, they just left. Virgin used them for ages, didn't really ever seem to achieve the place in the market that they'd hoped. And so I think they only just shipped them all away only by the end of last year or middle of last year. I think they were gone. So a new aircraft coming back in, it's a regional type aircraft. It's carrying a smaller number of people. Potentially it's suitable to more of the regional market. So we might see that being applied at airfields that haven't normally had jet RPT services before. And that really can bring quite a change to paradigm shift in a regional airport that's not used to that type of operation. I mean, it triggers a whole bunch of requirements, not just from the number of people that are turning up and working through the terminal building, but it's going to change the requirements for pavement concessions. It's going to need all of the services and equipment, ground staff employed to be able to manage different types of aircrafts coming in. And that's something I guess that regional airports are now looking at. And part of that idea of a route that might appear attractive to one airline is going to appear attractive to another one if the resources and the demand all line up in those locations. So I'm not surprised that one airline finds it attractive to operate between Sunshine Coast southbound, and another airline also says, hang on a minute, that's going to be an attractive market for us too. I'm not surprised they're not jumping in. Seeing Canberra come into the market, I guess triggered by the fact that it was a location where there wasn't ever a significant case of COVID identified. So you had a whole bunch of people desperate to go and travel somewhere. It's generally an affluent market, and there are people there looking for vacations. Normally during the middle of the year, they're all traveling to northern states. They couldn't go. And now as summer's approaching, those people are looking for their overseas travel. That's not available either. So there is a strong market there looking to go and see the rest of Australia, and putting on aircraft that are capable of delivering that service out to regional and attractive aircraft too, that people want to get on to travel. I think there is a natural reticence for people getting on to turboprop aircraft or small aircraft to travel regionally, and having jet services operating is a more attractive market for people. That's going to be a key factor in the way I think we play out.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Really good point. And you mentioned a few things about kind of airline economics there, being attractive to now regional markets, because you have that aircraft that can come as that economic sweet spot to kind of go to not a very dense route, but not a very thin route. It's kind of that middle market. With the Embraer 190 having about seat capacity about 100 seats, slightly more than a Dash 8 Q400. So, suddenly that can be attractive to some markets. So I won't be surprised based on some of these new types that are coming into the market a little bit that you see some, and actually before I say that, airlines that are actively pursuing destinations to put these on. You might see some interesting kind of routes pop up as they keep coming in. The JetBlue CEO actually was just recently quoted in an industry source, Airline Network News and Analysis, Anna.aero. And I'll just read you a quote from the article. It's really quite pertinent. He goes, "When times are good, there's less incentive or need to try risky routes, but now everything's risky." That's that he was quoted as saying that. And they've been JetBlue. I mean, look, it's the American market, not the Australian market, but he was quoted as saying it's a fabulous time to experiment with routes. So I think that sort of maybe that's an entrepreneurial spirit to some degree. This kind of taking risks and seeing what we can do. I think you'll see that, and I think the Australian airlines are doing that. We're seeing some very interesting regional routes pop up. Take the risk now, because you might uncover those things that were kind of hidden before with existing traffic flows, or the aircraft types didn't work out, or the fleet structures of airlines didn't support that. It wasn't in their strategy. So yeah, it's an interesting time to see where that could develop.
Yeah, I think crystal ball necessary. for some of this work at the moment. It is a bit of new space. It's a new territory to explore and must be a very challenging time. I wonder how you feel as a CEO at the moment, taking gambles like that.
Sorry, it must be tough because, here you are trying to stay alive. The cash flow has been massively impacted. And yet at the same time, you need to take risks to kind of bolster your place in the market.
The whole business model's changed. And you're trying to find a way to respond to it. And there's fantastic people working in airlines. We know that it's kind of their bread and butter to be able to respond to changing demand and capacity. And they do this every day. But really, this is a quantum leap more complex than bringing on a new airline or a single new route. This is a whole bunch of new routes and a whole environment. Yeah,
exactly. So maybe my earlier comment about regressing to the mean is built on a very shaky foundation. Who knows? Well, I guess time will tell. So, yeah. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast, Matt. It's my first ever podcast, so hopefully it went well. It's been great having this discussion. It's always a good discussion with you. And thanks again for having me on the show.
Yeah, Anthony, real pleasure having you on. It's fantastic to have your insights into how you see Australian aviation moving forward. Got a wealth of knowledge in this area, and it's been really a pleasure. So my name is Matt Shepherd. You can find me on to70.com.au and on LinkedIn as well. And Anthony?
Yeah, you can find me we have a corporate website, redwatercg.com, and LinkedIn as always. So looking forward to touching base. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to both of us and we'll go from there.
Thank you for listening. To contact any of the hosts from this episode, please go to the links in the post description. For more info regarding the topics discussed in today's show, please visit our website, www.to70.com, where you can also access all our published industry articles in our blog section. To provide feedback on today's show or to simply inquire about our services, please contact us at info@to70.com.au. Until next time, safe travels.